Hello everybody! In this spreadsheet tutorial, we're going to go over how to use conditional formatting in Google Sheets and Numbers for the Mac. So let's go ahead and get started with our examples in Google Sheets. In this first example, we're going to go over how to visually see the progress of certain tasks or projects that you're trying to complete. And we're going to combine this with data validation, okay? So the first thing we want to do is set up data validation for these cells here. So let's go up to Data, Data Validation. We'll choose our cell range. We'll say OK. And for our criteria, we want to choose a list of items. And for the items, we're going to put in the different status levels for our tasks. So the first one is on schedule. The next one is behind schedule. And the third one is going to be urgent. We can leave everything else the same. And before we hit save, just know that if you want to ever remove these validations, here's the remove validation option. Okay, so let's go ahead and hit save. And now you can see the little drop down arrows. For each task, we can determine and put in the status: on schedule, behind schedule, or urgent. Okay, now if you have a really long list here, it might be easy just to identify these with a color. So let's go ahead and put in our conditional formatting. Let's choose our cell range for these cells. Go up to Format, Conditional Formatting. Click on the Add New Rule. And for our first rule, we're going to go here, Format Cells If. Let's go to Text is Exactly. And then we're going to put our text in right here. So for the first one, let's put in the on schedule. And we'll leave that as green. We'll hit done. We don't need this cell is not empty, so we can remove that by clicking on the trash can. Now let's just do a quick test. So let's go to task 1, and let's just say that task 1 is on schedule. When we click on schedule, this should turn green. Okay, it does. Now we haven't set up these others yet with the color. Okay, so let's go ahead and set those up. Let's go back to Format, Conditional Formatting. Let's click on Add New Rule. Again, go to Format Cells If. We'll go to Text is Exactly. For this one, let's put in behind schedule. And that color will be yellow. We can hit done. Let's add our last rule. Format Cells If. Text is urgent. And for that, we're going to choose red. Hit done. Okay, so now we have all of our rules set up. If the task is on schedule, it will show as green. If the task is behind schedule, it will show as yellow. And if the task is urgent, it will show as red. So we can close that. So now let's go ahead and put in the status for all of our tasks. So let's say that Task 2 is behind schedule, Task 3 is urgent, Task 4 is on schedule, and so on. And now we have a nice little color-coded table here that shows us visually by color which tasks need attention. So for example, it looks like Task 3 and Task 9 need urgent attention or need to be completed quickly, okay? So let's move on to our next example. Here we're just going to color code this temperature scale. So let's go ahead and select the numbers. Let's go up to Format. Again, go to Conditional Formatting. And then we want to go to Color Scale. Okay? And to choose our color scale, let's go right here to the preview and click this drop down. And let's choose white to red. And now you can see the temperature portrayed with the color scale of white to red. So the hotter the temperature, the more red it is. Okay, so for our next example, let's say that we have a data set here and we want to color code any numbers in this data set that meet a certain threshold. So let's go ahead and choose our data set. Let's click on Add New Rule. Make sure that the range is correct. So we have F2 through F11. That looks good. Go to Format Cells If. And let's go to greater than or equal to, put in our value, and let's say that the threshold is 70. And we can leave the color green and hit done. And now we have the values in our data set that meet the threshold are filled in with the green color. Let's move on to our next example. And in this case, this isn't technically conditional formatting. However, what we're going to do is we're going to use this example to give us an idea for another type of conditional formatting to create a data type heat map. Okay, so we can choose all of this data. We have the states in the US and their corresponding population. So let's go ahead and choose this data. And if we go up to Insert, Chart, go to Chart Types, go down to the Maps, and then we hit Insert, we get a map here. Now let's go up to the drop down, go to Advanced Edit. Let's change our region to the United States. And you can see now we have a heat map here. Okay. Now let's go ahead and hit Update. So this is one way to create a heat map. But let's say that you wanted to create a heat map with this data here, and you wanted to do it in a slightly different way using conditional formatting. Well, let's go over an example of how to do that. So let's go to our Heat Map 2 tab here. And here we have all of our states with their corresponding populations laid out approximately where they would be on a map. And again, I'll stress approximately. But kind of a cool thing we can do with this is we can actually color code all of these values to give us a data type heat map. So if we select all of our data, let's go to Add New Rule. Let's go to Color Scale. Let's choose our scale. In this example, let's choose green to white to red. Okay, so now you have a data heat map, and you can see the states with the higher populations are red, and the states with the mid number of populations are kind of white or pinkish, and the states that don't have a high population are green or dark green. Okay? So those are just some examples of how you can use conditional formatting in Google Sheets. So now let's go over some examples of how to use conditional formatting in the Numbers spreadsheet application for the Mac. Okay, so here we are in Numbers. For our first example, we're going to use a number example. And in this case, what we want to do is highlight temperatures. And this is somewhat arbitrary, but let's just say that we have an idea of what ideal temperatures are, and it falls between 72 and 85 degrees. So let's select our data. We want to go over to the cell, go to Conditional Highlighting, add a rule, and for this example, we're going to go to between two numbers. And let's go ahead and put in the arbitrary numbers that we decided are ideal temperatures. Let's put in 72 and 85. Let's fill that in with green. And now we have the temperatures that we think are ideal in this data set highlighted. Moving on to our next example. In this case, we're going to use a text example. And we want to highlight anything that equals research. Okay, so let's select our data, go to Conditional Highlight, add a rule, let's go to Text, and let's choose Is, and put in the text. So anything that needs to be researched, we're going to say research, and in this case, let's just bold the text. Okay, now one thing before we move on, if you ever want to delete a conditional highlight, you can go to the rule and hover over the rule name and then click on this trash can here to delete it. But we should be good to go with this example. Let's go ahead and hit done. And you can see all of the research text is now highlighted. Moving on to our next example. In this case, we're going to use some dates. So again, let's go to Cell, Conditional Highlight, add a rule, click on the dates. And in this example, we want in the range. And we want to highlight anything that occurred in March. So let's put in our date, 3/1/16. And just to specify, we want anything in March in the year 2016. Let's put in our next date, 3/31/16. Let's go ahead and leave it as blue. And we can hit done. And you can see anything that occurred in March is now highlighted with blue. Okay, let's move on to our next example. And this is very similar to our previous example in Google Sheets with the schedule. So let's show you how to do that same example in numbers. So the first thing we want to do is set up data validation for our status. However, in numbers, this is called pop-up menu. Okay, so let's click on pop-up menu. Let's go ahead and delete the defaults. And for our first item, let's put in on schedule. Let's add another one. For this one, let's put in behind schedule. And for our third, let's put in urgent. Let's go ahead and start our first item with a blank. You can see now that we have our pop-up menu options. So let's go ahead and select those data cells again. I had previously set these rules up, so let's go ahead and delete them and set them back up just to show you how it's done. So let's go to Add Rule. Let's go to Text. We'll click on the Is, and for our first rule, the text is going to be on schedule. And this we want to be green. Let's add another rule. Text is. For this one, it is behind schedule. And this should be yellow. Let's add another rule. For this one, the text is urgent. And the fill color is going to be red. Let's go ahead and hit done. And now we can go ahead and we can put in the status for our different tasks. So task 1 is on schedule, which is green. Task 2 is on schedule. Task 3, behind schedule. Let's go ahead and fill the rest of these in. Okay, so it looks like for all of our different tasks, we're pretty good to go. We're a little bit behind schedule on task 3 and task 8, and for task 6, this deserves some urgent attention. Needs to be completed quickly. Okay, so those are just a few examples of how to use conditional formatting or conditional highlighting. We will be doing many more spreadsheet tutorials in the near future. Join us for those, and we'll see you next time.